And we're live. Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on when you're watching and where you're watching from. This is Marion Spears Carr and my friend Meridith Grundei. This is a special pop-up healthcare thought leadership LinkedIn live show to kick off your Thanksgiving season. And today's topic, Meridith, and I'll introduce her in a minute, but she and I have been talking a lot over the years around leadership and presence and how you present yourself. And one of the things that we really want to stress going into the holidays, going into the end of the year, is this idea of around, do you really want to be a leader that is impactful? It starts with confidence in how you show up. Meridith, introduce yourself. I was glad to have you back on the show, and always glad to be working with you.
Oh my goodness, Marion. I think we have a great time and this is going to be a juicy conversation. I'm excited about it. I'm Meridith Grundei. And like Marion has said, we've been having these conversations for the last couple of years on platforms like Clubhouse and LinkedIn Audio and here live. And sometimes we get on long phone conversations and talk about some of these things. And I am a public speaking presentation skills coach. I predominantly work with leaders in technical industries, so whether that be medical or technology itself, and just incredibly passionate about taking my background as a performer and theater artist and improviser and helping people really drop in and give themselves permission to speak from, and I know we throw the word around a lot, authentic, but to really speak from their authentic self, which to me is bringing in their personality and what they value and their spirit to everything that they do.
And I love the work that you do, because I work with leaders all over the country. For those of you who don't know me, I am an executive search leader in the space of healthcare and life sciences, but I work a lot with a lot of different industries as well, in leadership development and training around authentic gratitude. That's one of the programs that I offer. But one of the things that I see with leaders, all walks of life, young, old, men, wherever it might be, is the ones that do have the biggest impact, the ones that do have the best relationship with their followers, is that they come from a place, as you mentioned, authenticity, but they're confident in who they are. And that's what I'd love for us to talk a little bit about, is this idea of around, I would love for you, Meridith, to talk about how you've worked with some leaders that are very bright, bring a lot to the table, but their ability to have confidence in their message, be aware of their presence, self-awareness is one of the key things around leadership, right? Yeah. Integrity is number one for most part, but then that second piece is like, what are you self-aware? And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, maybe giving some examples. And if you're watching live, let us know where you're watching from. Again, this is a pop-up LinkedIn live show for today. I'd love to, if you have questions, let us know in the comments that you're watching. And Meridith, share a little bit about how you've worked with leaders in that regard.
I think I want to take a step back a little bit too, which is culturally in the professional world, I feel that we've all been trained to show up in a certain way. And what that person looks like when we show up at work may not necessarily look like that person that shows up at home or shows up with a group of friends. And I think fundamentally that's the issue. So there's people who I feel who are in leadership positions who maybe they wouldn't say it's fear, but inherently I think it's a fear of really truly showing up as who you are. So I feel like what needs to happen is there needs to be some self-awareness and permission given to oneself to show up how you would authentically show up wherever you are in the world, meaning you're not changing who you are just because of that particular environment. That takes a lot of confidence to be able to do that. A tremendous amount, right?
It does.
Yeah. So fundamentally, I think there's an issue with that, culturally speaking, which makes it difficult for people. But then once you've identified that that's one of the challenges, then what is it that you do to start building your confidence so that you can show up more fully? because that's only going to benefit you. It's going to benefit the organization. It's going to benefit your team. And then obviously your customers. So I would say take baby steps. I'm a huge fan of baby steps. And nothing is a quick fix. Nothing's overnight. And just start noticing what you notice. It's one of my favorite quotes. It's an Allen Ginsberg quote. And what I mean by that is maybe it's you pick up a journal and maybe you're not a journaler and you've never done that ever in your whole entire life. But instead of picking up the phone and starting off digital in the morning, you start off analog and you write down, here's what I'm noticing that I'm feeling. And it could be very, very simple. I'm tired, or I'm feeling cranky, or I'm feeling excited about the day, or whatever it is that you awaken to. And then just start noticing your own thoughts and what is it that you can transform about those thoughts that are going through your head. So if it's every morning you wake up cranky, why?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And what is it that you can say in place of that? Today is a new opportunity for me to not be cranky. Could maybe be the only thing you write in your journal. But it's just starting with baby steps, I feel.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so I want to go back to a couple of things you said. First, I want to shout out Michelle Stefano. Thank you for checking in. If you're watching live, she's in the comments. Michelle, we're glad to have you. And Michelle works with leaders all across the country as well in a similar capacity, helping them become better leaders. But a couple of things that you said, it really resonated with me. One is this idea of how sometimes we have been taught to compartmentalize, our work life and our personal life, or who we are outside. And one of the things that for me, I have a very regional accent. People know that I'm from the South. They may not know exactly where I'm from, but I'm pretty open about the fact that I'm from North Carolina. I live in the mountains of Georgia. But when I first got into the executive search business, I felt like that was a little bit of a barrier for me. And I tried, not successfully, to change how I talked. That was a disaster. It was a complete disaster. It was a complete disaster. It was such a shame. And that I went through that process. But what I learned through that was that I needed to be more intentional about how I articulated my words in certain context. I did have to modify some of my colloquialisms and regional terminology to work across the country. And now I work internationally. But through that, what I found out was when I was being authentic, to use that word again, I felt more confident in who I was. And what became funny about it, or interesting about it, maybe funny is not the word, interesting about it, is people would recognize my voice. Right. And not just my voice in terms of how I sound, but almost my voice and my thoughts and what kind of my philosophies. And it grew from there, and confidence kind of grew from there. And I think that's really important. The other part that you talked about is this idea of rather than saying, I'm going to be an impactful leader on a big scale and I'm going to make all these different changes. I love that idea of being incremental and just starting with small steps or baby steps, as you talked about it. And I'm a journaler, not every day, but I use that. I think that's really important. But that self-awareness, talk a little bit about why you feel like sometimes people have a hard time seeing that in themselves. In other words, sometimes leaders, their lack of confidence at times is because they didn't go through that process. They didn't take the time to just be honest with themselves. Talk a little bit about that. I think because that really speaks to being our presence as well. Is like, how can we break down and go, wait a minute, I need to be honest with myself. I am being cranky, as you talked about, or in my case, I might be going too fast, like expecting people to understand what I'm saying and that what I'm sharing with them is self-evident, when in fact, I need to be better explaining what I'm asking or what my intentions are. What's one thing that somebody can do to like go, I need to be not self-critical, but maybe take a more introspective look into myself. I don't know your thoughts about that. I don't know if I
Well, I
kind of
think
went
there's
off
I
topic
love it.
there.
My brain is going in like 5,000
Yeah.
different directions because I'm one of those people that, yeah, I'm a coach, but I don't ever think there's a one size fits all,
Yeah.
like special sauce approach to anything.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think my first question would be, it's not a question. I think this is a generalization, but there are some people who just have never been taught
Yeah.
how to even be self-aware, right? They don't even know they're walking through life doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
So my biggest thing is, how do you start spreading the message to be curious, and how do you
Mhm.
start spreading that message culturally that there are resources for you to grow? And so if the tools are there, then people are most likely going to use those tools. So
Mhm.
this goes beyond the individual leader, because they may not even know that they talk too fast. They may not even know that they need to develop their confidence and self-awareness unless somebody says, hey, here's a pathway for doing this, and when
Mhm.
we would like everyone to consider it. So let's just say that you're at the infant stages of self-awareness and building yourself up and growing as a leader
Mhm.
and stepping into that greatness and presence that you know you have. Is just, I always say, find somebody that you work with, like a colleague or somebody that you trust, and say, hey, this is something I'm working on, and I'm wondering if you can help me by holding me accountable to these things, or share with me when I'm speaking too fast at a meeting, or share with me when you don't think I'm listening as clearly as I could be, or when I've railroaded somebody's idea,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
that at least you have it's a buddy system, accountability buddy system, if you will, that's built in. That was the first thing that popped into my head.
I I love that idea, because one of the things that I struggled with at times, particularly when I was a young leader years and years ago, is that I had all the book knowledge. I got a degree in basically in leadership. My master's came later, but my undergraduate degree was in management, but it was really focused on leadership. And I thought I had all the answers, which when you're 21 years old, you only had two answers, right? You didn't have all of them. But I was very fortunate very early in my career to understand the value of a mentor very early. Um, that mentor had to call me out on some things, and that person became a mentor because of that. But I think also having that peer relationship with others and say, hey, look, I'm trying to improve, I'm trying to be better. Um, you know, help me in that. I love that examples, like, if I'm talking too much in the meeting, please let me know, right? Or if my questions seemed not clear,
Yeah.
asking good questions really is, in my mind, is the way I learned.
Hmm.
That is the way I learned, is asking good questions. But I had to practice asking good questions. A lot of times my questions would be, I presupposed they thought I knew what I was asking, right? And I had to be
Uh-huh.
more clear. That's being intentional. I love that idea around working with someone. It's a trust thing, right? We grow that way. Let me ask you this question, Meredith.
Hmm.
When you um, think about leaders in that context, finding that person in the organization, it almost has to be kind of a give and take, right? I need you to help me, but how can someone present that to the other person as a way of helping them as well? Because I think when we have that collaboration and there's a value from both sides, that'd be
Yeah.
a great way to learn and build our confidence together. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel that, well, first of all, it takes deep listening. So for the maybe the if this is an idea that pops into your head, or you're listening right now and you're like, ooh, this is something I want to try at work.
Mm,
I would say spend a good amount of time listening, and then once you've listened to what that other person that you're like, oh, I think that would be a really great accountability partner, uh, then approach them and just say, hey, I've got these things I'm working on, and I'm wondering if there's anything that you also are working on to develop your skills and growth as a leader. And then if both of you are in agreement that this would be a great partnership, then I think it's really important to get clear about what that feedback loop looks like, because feedback can also break down one's confidence, even if it's positive feedback, because sometimes if we're not ready to receive or hear, it can actually hinder our growth. So I feel what was it? A good question when it comes to feedback is, what have you tried already? And then start there, because then they can share with you all of the things that I've been journaling already. I've been reading this book. I've been attending these classes, so that you, as a person who's there trying to help them, don't make assumptions about what they have or haven't done already for their professional growth.
That's a massive question. What have you done already? Because we often walk into a situation where, or at least in my opinion, sometimes I walk in, I have also I'm guilty of having like a preconceived idea or answer to a question they haven't asked, right? Like, okay,
right.
I've got the answer to the question you haven't asked. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now. That's the way I probably have 10 answers to the question you haven't asked yet, already prepared.
It's so hard to be human.
It is so hard. It's brutal. Like, it's so brutal. Kind of a side note to that, I decided I needed to learn something new. When I learned something new, it helps me with my brain. It helps me improve my memory. For some of those of you who don't know, I'm a brain injury survivor, so I have a real challenge with short-term memory. But I've learned that when I'm learning something new, particularly something I have no knowledge of or limited knowledge of to begin with, that my brain does better in all my other activities, in the executive work, executive search work that I do, in dealing with my family, with being a thought leader in some of the work that I'm working on my book, etc. So every now and then I can't get too in the weeds with it, but I try to take on something new. And that new experience for me, and the more foreign it is to me, the better, because it puts me in that unconscious incompetent, I don't know what I don't know phase of learning. And then I have to ask more questions. And I have to wait for the answer, right? I have to actually, if I'm trying to get somebody to help me or I'm trying to learn. And so how does that tie back to what this question? I love this question around, what have you tried so far in your growth? Because it would help us understand where they are in the learning process.
Yeah.
Right. Are they in the unconscious incompetent? They don't know what they don't know. And then we can be very elementary and rudimentary. Like, have you tried this, this, and this? Or we can start talking about what's not worked. Right. Okay. You tried that. Why has it not worked?
Yeah.
I love that question. I'm going to actually write that one down. What have you done so far? I think that's a great question. And I think that's a question we need to ask ourselves too. And Meredith, I love your thoughts on this. I've noticed it's in the learning grid process of learning, or sometimes we think we're much further up the learning scale than we really are. So I love that idea of, how can we ask that question to ourselves, Meredith, in terms of our development as a leader? Your thoughts on that? I really like that question, right? What have you done so far?
Yeah, no, I love that idea of reflecting it back on oneself in terms of their own professional growth. In fact, I'm going to write that down and look at that as we enter into 2024.
Yeah.
Which is, whether you're a leader or a business owner, solopreneur, I think it's great to have that as a question to reflect on yourself, especially if you're feeling stuck, or you're like, wow, I'm not seeing the growth that I want to see, or I'm not leaving the impact that I want to be leaving my clients with, or whatever that question might be. What is it? What is it I have tried so far? And then you can go back and go, okay, well, this worked and this didn't work. And you get a lot more of a clear picture. And then it's like, well, okay, well, then what can I try next? What's the next thing that I can try And I feel that, and you've alluded to this, you said practicing
Yeah.
how you communicate. I feel that it's about giving it the consistency that it needs when you're trying something new, and it takes the practice. It could be that you work with your peer, your colleague, and you
Mhm.
practice how to ask good questions, because that
Yeah.
is a practice. You can't just read a book and then show up in a conference room and ask good questions. You have to practice them. Is it that you want to get better at communicating uh, the features of whatever program that you have, and yet you're not getting an emotional connect, like there's no emotional connect with your audience? So maybe it's practice storytelling
Yeah.
as a leader, so that you can bring in more of that emotional connect into the things that you do. So I feel like, again, going back to what I said at the beginning, it's baby steps and then practice and committing to the practice.
Yeah. And I think of that practice, we have to realize that, okay, let's face it. We live in a world where we microwave minute rice. Think about it. There was, if you pick up a box of minute rice from back in the day, you could bring boiling water up and make rice that took 2 minutes, right? Or maybe 3. Now there's microwave instructions on minute rice to cut that 2 minutes to 30 seconds. So our attention span and our expectation of moving from point A to point C is we want it right now. We want it absolutely right now. That's not how this works from a leadership perspective. We can't
No,
microwave it. Like, we can't just push a button. It's not
no.
an app on our phone. I know that's kind of a
But
dated
here's the
reference.
deal, Marion,
Yeah.
that when you actually take the time, and you can debate me on this, and people,
Yeah.
and we have a couple comments too.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can debate me on this, but when you microwave something and you take 1 minute to make something, it does not taste as good as
Not
if you
taste exactly. That's the
to make
exactly.
it, right?
Exactly.
So if we're going
Exactly.
to draw an analogy here, I would say
It was
you
silly,
try
but
to
it
quick
was
fix your leadership skills is not going to taste very good.
not going to taste very good. It's going to, and worse, it's going to leave a bad taste in the mouth of the people you intend to follow you, right? You tend to lead. Yeah, you can't microwave it. So that practice is, you have to practice it a lot. So transparent, the new thing I'm learning, I'll just share this to connect with it. I'm learning to play chess. I didn't play chess as a kid. I
Oh, cool.
wasn't,
Yeah.
it's really hard. It's really, really
Yeah.
hard. And I'm playing online, and I'm getting crushed by 12-year-olds from Pakistan. Like, they're crushing me online. They're crushing me. And not only am I learning to play chess, classical chess, I'm learning to play speed chess, where you have only a minute to make all your moves. It's silly. I'm getting crushed, but I realize that it's repetition. I've got to practice, right? More, and the more I practice, the more I learn, the more I see my mistakes. And that's the same analogy to what we're talking about. Let's check in. Aaron's checking in from Cincinnati, Ohio. Such a simple and collaborative place to start a conversation. What have you tried so far? I'm oftentimes feeling and ready to be defensive when something may not be going well or perceived to not be going well already. Meredith, thanks for checking in. I love that. I love that idea. What are your thoughts, Meredith? Yep.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to just read the question out loud again. Yep. So the first part, thank you. And then, what have you tried so far? Okay. I'm oftentimes feeling and ready to be defensive when something may not be going well or perceived to not be going well already.
He's talking about in terms, I'm taking that as it's not happening fast enough. It's like, I'm working on it. I'm trying to develop as a leader, but the perception is it's not working. No,
because it's not happening fast enough in the eyes of the other people. Yeah. Oh, that's really that's like unnecessary stress. And then B, I think this is the difficult part, because overall that's education. I feel like that's why when you can work together as a team, Like
Yeah.
if leadership and a team can be work, I've done a lot of the improv when I was
Yeah.
back in the day, I would go in and I would teach improv workshops to teams and leaders and their teams. And there was always a significant difference when leadership would show up and participate with their team versus when they didn't participate with their team, because now their team has this whole new skill set that they've learned on how to communicate with each other through these
Yep.
improv exercises. And leadership doesn't have that new vocabulary. So
Yep.
to me, it's about how can you find opportunities for growth so everybody understands that this is not just a leadership over here, quick fix, but that it's we got to grow and develop together, and we all have these sets of tools in order to make that happen. And now that's not always going to be like, that's an amazing scenario if we can get that to happen. So I'm wondering if there's a way where you can communicate, here's where I've started, and here's where I'm at, and here's where I'm hope to get to, and so that people kind of see where your milestones are as a leader as well. So being a little bit more transparent, I feel might be helpful. What about you, Marion? What are your thoughts?
I'm thinking about it. So there's a thought leader from the late 1800s and the early 1900s who was arguably, and Meredith, you and I've talked about her before. Her name's Mary Parker Follett. And she was a social worker, but also a human resources focused person. And her whole life was really studying around the relationship between managers and followers. And one of the things that she talked about was how compromise, and I'll tie it back to what you're talking about, compromise, when we compromise, her philosophy around compromise was a loss to both sides. Somebody had to give up something, right? If there's a compromise, then, and we've been taught we should compromise and et cetera. What she focused on is the most successful leaders really, instead of compromising, they integrated the needs of the workers and integrated the needs of management so that there was a collective improvement on both sides and that they both agreed. So I think about and how does that tie to what Aaron's talking about? When there's a perception of the leadership work that you're doing is not getting the results necessary, it may come down to the leadership development work that you're doing may not be necessarily what the followers that you're trying to lead need. So it may be to improve yourself, right? I need to be a better communicator. Well, that better communicator may be solely focused on how I talk and the words that I use and influence that I have, using Cialdini's influences, et cetera. But to your point earlier, maybe I'm not listening actively as much. Maybe the reason that there's perception that how I'm developing a leader is not as impactful is the point of reference of the audience. You see kind of where I'm going with that? So
I totally do. That makes 100%. That makes so much sense. Yeah.
So if we think about asking a great question, if there's this perception that we're not developing as a leader in the right direction, it's to stop and go, as a leader, what do you need from me as a leader? What is it that you need? Your point of reference. And that's where we go from compromise. I'm going to give you a little bit and you're going to give in a little bit. And we're going to come up with this. What if what you need as a leader is someone who listens far more actively and addresses certain problems that they may have as followers. And then how can I integrate that into what I'm developing in my skill set as a leader? How can I be more aware of that? That's what I was thinking about as you were talking. I was like, that is one way to think about it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Meredith?
Well,
I want to get some sales comments.
I want to just highlight the simple question of what do you need?
Yeah.
And I know that even in my relationship with my husband, there will be times where we're having a whole conversation and I'll pause and I'll just look at him. And this just happened the other morning. I said, what do you need right now?
Yeah.
And he was so grateful that I asked that question,
Yep.
because then he was able to share, well, actually, I hadn't thought of it.
Yep.
And so that's actually a really powerful question to be asking the individuals on your team,
Yep.
and for them to be able to ask you.
Yeah. What do you need? What, as a follower, what do you need from us, and
Yeah.
create an environment where they're safe and they feel safe, that they're not going to be, you know, secure in asking a question to that level. Michelle's dropped off because she has another meeting, but I want to get to her point. Some of her clients are working on the need to manage up effectively. We've talked about leadership down a lot. Finding the greatest
Right.
opportunities, learning how everyone is communicating with one another is a way it's received. What advice can you give for assisting others in managing up? Because I think and we're kind of talking about that because we're talking about the relationship between the follower and the leader. How can we manage up? And from a communication perspective, how can we be more impactful, more present in that regard, Meredith?
Well, I feel that it's about really being noticing what you're modeling on a day-to-day basis. So how you interact with people, how you show up in rooms, how you ask the good questions, how you listen, all of that is, I feel, down or up, crucial to leadership growth all over the place, is how you're modeling your own behaviors. I say that as a speaking coach, I share that a lot too, especially to leaders. I'm like, you're getting up on stage and you're presenting things in front of customers all the time. And you're modeling, you're the one setting the bar.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's important. I think and when we are a subordinate role, or we do have to manage them, we start with demonstrating the characteristics and presence that we would expect from them, right?
Yep.
Like, we can set the example for others. It doesn't matter where they are in the hierarchy, if you want to use that term. We can set the example, like showing up at meetings on time or following up. You know, I struggle with that sometimes because I overload my schedule. One of my goals for 2024, I've already been working on my 2024 goals, is to get back to being not committing to so many things. Right.
Yeah.
And so that sets the example if you want to manage up, because if we want the presence, if we expect our leaders to be present with us, then by golly, when it's time to be with them, we probably need to be present as well. We don't need to be looking at something else. We don't want to be walking into a meeting with our phone in our hand. But anyway, you know what? We're out of time. We're actually over time, Meredith.
No.
Can you believe that? 30. Yeah, we just went right through 30 minutes, just like that.
Wow. We're going to have to do this again, Marion.
Yeah, we're going to do it again. Let's do it in January. We'll get the word out, and we'll have the same discussion in early January to talk about how to do this, how to be impactful, how to grow as leaders in 2024. Doesn't that sound like the future? 2024. That sounds to me, that sounds like the future.
It's a lot of even numbers.
Yeah, it's a lot. It sounds like the future. It sounds like something like in 2024. Like,
it is the future.
It is the future.
Marion, literally.
Yeah, I know. We thought the future was going to be like the Jetsons.
We did.
Yeah. And you know what the future is? Self-checkout. That's the future. Self-checkout at Walmart, at the grocery store. That's not the Jetsons. We're having to do more work.
Yeah, I know. We have to. Well, now there's I don't know if you have them where you are, but here in New York City, we have you can just walk in and you can grab whatever you want in the store and then walk out. I mean, you give them your card. I haven't done it yet, so I'm probably not getting all of the details correct. Yeah. You just scan your card once. You can grab as many things as you want, and it's all, I think it's an Amazon Go or something. It's pretty, it's interesting. That's
interesting. Anyway, enough about that. We've gone off track. I'm Marion Spears-Carr. This is the Healthcare Thought Leadership LinkedIn Live Show, a special pop-up to everyone in the U.S. Happy Thanksgiving for all of our international. And we do have Meredith, you and I have a very large international network. We're thankful for you. Meredith, say goodbye, and we'll shut her down.
I love it. Well, Marion, I'm grateful for you, my friend. And thanks for holding the space for this. And thank you for those that watched today. And we hope you got some value out of it.
We hope so as well. We had a good time. Have a great day. Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.
And we'll see you in next time.
Yes.